All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Counselor Connect session. My name is Amanda Callahan, and I am the coordinator for Counselor Connect, which is a networking and professional learning community for school counselors and social workers across the state of Indiana. Joining me today for our session on culturally responsive school counseling is Lydia McNeely. Lydia is the college and career coordinator for the school city of Hammond. She is a licensed school counselor, also serves on the ASCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and is a National School Counselor Fellow. Before I do get started, I want to make you aware that this session will be recorded, and we will post it to our Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel in the next few days. Additionally, you will be able to access Lydia's slides using the bit.ly that was on the previous slide, but I will also copy that into the chat here in just a minute. If you have questions for Lydia throughout the session, please feel free to add those into the chat, and she will be kind of monitoring those throughout the session and responding. And with that, Lydia, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to get the session started. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you a little bit about a subject that I am very passionate about. So today we hope to, so today's learning objectives would be to talk about how the school counselor's role is to advocate for all students. You're going to hear me say advocate for all students quite a few times when I was reviewing the slides, because I think we do have to be very mindful that our job is literally to make sure that we are not missing any pieces and that we are definitely working with all of our students. I wanted to talk about developing a self-awareness about culture and bias and learn some action steps. We always talk about the work, but we want to make sure that not just having a conversation about the work that we want to do, but also make sure that we're going to take it a step further and continue on and make sure that there's some action steps that you would be able to use right away in your buildings. So those are the goals for today. So the role of the school counselor, again, our role is to advocate for all students. School counselors do have an ethical and professional responsibility to serve the needs of all of our students. So what I try to do, and I know the school counselors that I work with, we do try to continuously build in our toolbox, especially when you're working with a very diverse population. We know that about 70% of school counselors are identify as white women, but we know that the schools that we work in do not necessarily reflect that population. So we have to do our part to make sure that we're addressing the needs of everybody. And that also includes working on our own biases. So if we could play that video that right there, Amanda, that would be great. So we could play this for a minute and then we could talk, or I'll discuss it in a minute.
Lydia, do you want me to go to your next slide while I'm looking at that?
So that video, that video kind of discusses bias, and it talks about bias. And the video discussed how teachers they observe teachers' interactions with students in a classroom, and I think some of the students were white students, some of the students were Black students, and they ended up, once they review the data, they realized that for the same behaviors, the students who were Black were treated differently than the students who were white. But the good thing about it, and I think that what we want to remember is at the end of it, they did another study, and what they found out were the teachers who realized that they did have bias were able to kind of, what I would say, like check themselves and kind of recognize that they had that bias, and then moving forward, they were able to work better and understand, their role in educating that student. So at the end, it was like a positive move in which that they understood that their role is, again, to advocate for all students and to understand that they do have biases. So basically it was about bias. talking about bias. I know as school counselors, sometimes we try to, not say that we don't have bias, but it's difficult for us to say, okay, we might have biases, and biases are fine. They're part of us surviving and living. The only thing is that when it's affecting you and it's affecting students, then you have to kind of take a look back at yourself and kind of say, hey, you know what, maybe I did show bias, maybe I am showing preferential treatment to a certain individual, and maybe I can kind of adjust what I'm doing to better serve the student. So that is what that video was about. So we can go on to the next slide then. When you are thinking about
Do you see them, Lydia? Do you see
Yes,
the
I can see
slides now? Okay.
So when you are talking about becoming a culturally responsive school counselor, one of the things that you are going to want to do is go back to ASCA and really look at their position statements. If you go on the ASCA website, ASCA has a ton of position statements about different things that are important. What I showed here is the position statement for equity of all students. What I like about the position statements for ASCA is that it gives you like an explanation of what their position statement is. So this position statement says school counselors recognize and distinguish individual and group differences and strive to equally value all students and groups. School counselors are advocates for the equitable treatment of all students in school and in the community. So you're talking about that, but then what they do afterward is they're going to give you a rationale as to why that is the position statement. So if you're looking at the rationale that ASCA has, they're looking at the U.S. Department of Education when they did do a study, and the number of students of color in the United States public schools surpassed that of white students, yet white students graduate at higher rates than their Black and Hispanic counterparts. And besides that, there's also achievement gaps that exist under social economic lines. So what they also go on to talk about is students of color are a lot of them maybe first generation, or even if you're talking about just first generation students that are low income, they may aspire to go to college, but the application process might seem daunting to them. So what are we going to do to try to adjust for that and work with them to understand like what the needs are for the student and then for the family? As far as, like I said, the ASCA position statements, I keep them handy. If they have a position statement for LGBTQ, they have a position statement for culturally responsiveness, they have a position statement for anti-racism practices. So you're going to want to go ahead, and if you are doing this work and you want to be you want your administrators to know, like, this is a concern. This is why it's a concern. This is our national organization. This is what our national organization is saying is best practice. So our national organization is saying that we have to work together to find out how we can better serve this group of students. It's underrepresented students. They could be underrepresented because social, cultural groups. It could be income. They could be first generation. What can we do to help this particular group of students? So that way those numbers are not, where they're at right now, where white students graduate at a higher rate than Black or brown students. So again, be mindful of those ASCA position statements, going to the website. I believe at the end of the slides, I do have the position statement, like the links for that. So you can go on and review them. I always review them. There is some work that we did last year, and I had to use the position statement. I had to send that to to my principal. I had to send it to a teacher because the teacher was saying that we shouldn't be doing this type of work. I kind of had to go over that information with them. But again, it's always good to have that information handy. So what does it mean to be a culturally responsive school counselor? So being a culturally responsive school counselor, this is actually taken from Marsha Rutledge. She is actually, I believe, the ASCA DEI committee. I believe she's the co-chair. She's done a lot of amazing work when it comes to cultural responsiveness for the American School Counselor Association, for our profession in general. That is a link to her article. But as part of her article, what she's saying is that It means that you have to, school counselors, identify, recognize, and utilize the cultural strengths of students to increase positive outcomes. So when we talk about multicultural education, what you're always talking about, what, right now is Hispanic Heritage Month, for instance. So if you're going through halls, and hopefully you're going through halls in schools, and you're seeing, either decorations that reflect Hispanic Heritage Month, there might be dances at, assemblies, spirit weeks that are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Hopefully you are seeing that, because as a student, as myself, as a Latina, going to school, you'd want to walk into a building and see yourself in the building. So you'd want to see yourself celebrated, right? But what she's also saying is that you shouldn't just be doing that celebration. So you're going to want to celebrate diversity, but you're also going to want to make sure that social justice is a part of that. So your school counseling program shouldn't just be talking about multicultural and celebrating diversity, but also the social justice aspect. You're going to want to ensure that when there are issues that are arising, or if your students have concerns about what is going on in the community, what's going on within the country, that you're able to address and are aware of those inequities, and are able to address that with the students. And doing that together, along with being culturally responsive, that is what she feels is an essential part of you building this comprehensive school counseling program and addressing the needs of all of your students. So not just one piece, there's 3 different pieces that we have to kind of work and mesh together in order to have a successful program. What we did, as far as what we did, we work a lot with junior achievement, and junior achievement does have speakers, and we have a career series that we do with junior achievement. When we met with junior achievement in the beginning of the year, and this is right after COVID, and we wanted to start talking to students about different career paths. We met with junior achievement, and we asked them to ensure that whatever career speakers that they brought into the building, or that we're speaking virtually, because we do a lot of virtual career cafes, we wanted to ensure that those students, that the speakers were reflective of our population. So we wanted to make sure that those speakers, not necessarily all had to be Black or Brown speakers, but we definitely want to make sure that they were reflective of the amount of students of our population in the building. We had a speaker that she spoke to she was an entrepreneur. She was a Latina entrepreneur from Hammond, which is where I'm located at. And she spoke, and she told the students, keep in mind, about almost 50% of our population in the district is Hispanic. So she told the students, if somebody talks to you about not speaking Spanish, or makes you feel embarrassed about speaking Spanish in stores, speaking Spanish is your superpower. Like, that's something you should be proud of. 2 languages. That's something that's going to be so important to you as you get older, and as you go into college. And I remember, just feel like, I think I needed to hear her say that, if anything. I remember messaging, my co-counselor was on one text thread, and another person who happened to be Latina also was on the other text thread. And she's like, I'm not crying, you're crying. And I'm like, I'm crying. But literally, I think at that point, it was something that we needed to hear. And the students themselves were emotional. We got some positive feedback from the students, because it's something that they needed to hear, that they might not have heard otherwise. So again, just positive. When you are building a program, you want to ensure that you bring about, you bring different groups to the table. So when we talk about equity, how is it different than equality? So if you're talking about culturally responsive school counseling, it means that school counselors, if you are working with students and you're sending out even just letters about tutoring information, you want to make sure that you are aware of the population in which you're serving. If you are serving a community that is heavy Hispanic, or whatever, whatever race or language is being spoken at home, you want to make sure that you're aware of the language that is being spoken at home and ensure that the information that you are sending out reflects that. Yes, equality is sending out information to everybody, right? You are sending the same letters, you're sending the same information about tutoring to everybody. But if you're sending it out to everybody as a blanket, and the people and half of the people that you're sending it out to can't understand what you're saying, then you're doing a disservice to the students that, you know, whose parents can't understand that. So you want to be mindful of that when you're sending things and when you're doing things. Another thing is that when you are working, again, your community may not have the luxury. One of the things that is a pet peeve of mine is when I hear they don't care about their parents, they don't care about their they don't care about their children. They don't answer the phone when I call. They don't care about, and it's very unnerving to me to hear that. Before becoming a school counselor, you know, my path here was not like a linear path. I worked for a telecommunications company for several years where I was in a call center. So if my daughter's school called, I could never speak to them when they called. Like I had to hide by my desk and almost get in trouble to answer a phone call from a teacher, because I didn't have that luxury to be able to, like, you know, put somebody on hold or take you know, middle of conference, let me pause and let me go ahead and answer the call from the school. I didn't have the ability to do that. And a lot of our parents don't either. So you have to be mindful, again, of the population that you're serving. When you're sending information home about parent meetings, I'm not saying stay late, but be mindful of the times that you're sending information home. Be mindful, you know, sometimes your principal might be able to say, hey, you know what, we can work, you know, if you're able to stay later, then you could start later. Just make, you know, changes based on the needs of your students. Now the next slide is going to take us into videos, and I'm not sure, were you able, can we check to see if the videos will work?
I'm not able to change my setting for some odd reason. I did put the slides into the chat, so everybody will have access to the video links after the fact. If somebody knows how to do this regularly, wants to unmute, let me know. But I just searched in my settings and I couldn't find how to do it.
Okay, so what, if you're able to see them later, the videos that that would be included here. Let me see if it'll let me. Okay, I was hoping it was gonna let me, but it's not gonna let me. I'm sorry. Okay, so the videos that I had, Amanda, you can go back to sharing. I'm sorry, I was hoping it was gonna let me, but
okay.
It's not let me.
That's okay. I was gonna check my settings without the screen sharing a little bit more closely.
So the videos, unfortunately, we're not able to play them right now, but the videos are talking about microaggressions and students talking about microaggressions. So you have students of, there was like a multiracial boy, and he said, you know, some students say, I'm not Black enough. Another girl is saying about speaking Spanish. Another student saying that he was, you know, that a certain group was, you know, just basic stereotypes. So it's just two videos that are talking to you about microaggressions and how students feel having these, you know, feel. And if you have students, and I guess my question or what I was posing was, you may have students who feel this way. And I wish we could have been able to play the videos because they're really good videos. But if you are able to watch these later, you want to make sure that you are fostering a sense of belonging to students, creating a safe space for students, giving them the chance to express themselves. The videos that we had are videos that we used last year at Scott Middle School as for our No Place for Hate program. And so I did include a slide about the No Place for Hate program. And again, I apologize that we're having technical difficulties where you're not able to see the videos, but please, if you have a chance, go back and scroll through those videos. I think they're really good. Students have, they're going through a lot, and they hear these things during the day. They might hear them in school, they might hear them at home, and we want to make sure that we're addressing concerns like this for students and not just ignoring the fact that they're going through this. So definitely take a look at those videos if you have the opportunity to later on today. And if you can go to the next slide. So what we did last year, actually when George Floyd was murdered, and our school district was completely virtual. And then Adam Toledo was a Hispanic boy who was shot by the police in Chicago, and we are 30 minutes away from Chicago. We wanted to ensure that we had conversations with students if they felt that they wanted to have these conversations with us. We wanted to give them the opportunity to express themselves if that's the case. So the No Place for Hate link is there, and it is in the slides that you'll have access to, so you could definitely take a look at it there. But No Place for Hate is an anti-bullying program through the Anti-Defamation League. It is student-centered. So the topics that you pick are not topics that I feel are important or that my co-counselor would feel are important. They're issues and topics that students feel are important. We presented those videos about microaggressions to our students last year. Students that we were given, they were given the option, they weren't required, but they were given the option if they wanted to continue on with those courageous conversations. And so we invited those students into one of our offices. We had like a little conference room. We had about, I want to say about no more than 15 students. Myself, my co-counselors, and the director. At that point, we had a coordinator for the building coordinator for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we had a conversation. They saw the videos, and then they talked about their own experiences. And it was a really emotional, I think, for them. At first, they didn't want to raise their hand. At first, they didn't want to say anything. But then when they started learning like what microaggressions were, how they affected them, just started opening up about the experiences that they had, they all started raising their hands. And they're all like, oh, well, this happened to me, and this didn't feel right when, I was in a store and they didn't want me to, my grandfather to speak Spanish. And they started like talking about these incidences. And so I remember like at the end of that conversation, at the end of that session, like students the next day were like in our Google Classrooms and messaging us and saying, hey, can we have another meeting like that? Like, that was so great. Can we do that again? But they felt empowered. They felt validated. So the No Place for Hate program is just one example of something that you can use. But what we, when George Floyd was murdered and we started the program, it was completely virtual. And so we had our student ambassadors who were part of that program. Again, completely virtual. At that point, more race, social justice was their biggest concern, or what the school needed to address. Last year, we did do the topics of microaggression, but we noticed, because we had school consolidation and coming back from COVID, that bullying, just getting along with each other, was their topic of choice at that point. Going forward, I know my co-counselors are working. I'm no longer in that building, but I know that they're working with a committee. They already formed a committee. Again, learning from what we've done in the past, trying to kind of filter it out, figure out like what worked and what didn't work, but always being very mindful of our students and like what our students feel are important. Listening to them, taking a page from them, and kind of building what we're doing, what our responses are to that based on what their need is.
Lydia, I may have changed a setting.
Okay.
Do you want me to try a video and see if it
Go
works?
Go ahead.
I'll try it. We'll see what happens here. If not, then people have access to the links. Oh, yeah. Was that No Place for Hate video?
Yeah, that's their website. And actually, I know if everybody on this call is from Indiana, Bill Hicks is actually the assistant director for that program. So if you send a message through there, he responds right away. He's really good about that. So that's good.
Okay, we'll try this one.
I'm from Haiti and Nigeria.
Awesome.
Like three things, like I'm Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Black. I'm biracial. I have an African American father and an Irish American mom.
My name's Lamine.
I'm Muslim.
I'm Indian, British, Scottish, and American.
My parents are from Venezuela, and I was sharing like one of the foods that we eat, and then I got made fun of. They were like, "What is that? Ew. Oh, ew. What is that?" And like I cried because I felt like, oh, there's something wrong where I'm from. Like maybe like it's bad. Like I'm different.
I am an African-American adopted girl, only child, and I live with my two dads.
I remember when I was younger, I went with my family to a restaurant, and they made us pay in advance just in case we didn't pay afterwards, and that was kind of upsetting.
You start to notice that people are different, and you have comments, they might be racist or they might not be, but by the time you get older, you know that it is racist and you should stop.
I feel a little scared about if I, just walk down the street, cops might just think I'm doing something bad, and then if I try to explain to them, they won't listen and then just start beating me up and doing terrible things to me.
I think there's this anxiety that kind of comes with being biracial, that kind of eats away at you, almost like you have to prove yourself that you're one or the other. For example, I hear the phrase, "You're not black," all the time.
People sometimes think that I'm supposed to talk ghetto or whatever that is.
Oh, she's uneducated because she's African American.
Because I'm Hispanic or Latino, I can't have a lot of money.
Just this weekend, I went with my friend to Urban Outfitters, and we were shopping, and I really wanted to try on this dress, and then this lady that was just there, she was kind of watching me, and I'm just I'm not gonna steal it or anything.
I think white privilege is the idea that in your everyday life you're getting treated differently and sometimes with more respect, or people just trust you more, or they have certain expectations of you, like you might be smarter or you might be wealthier because you're white. It makes me feel guilty sometimes, even though it's not my fault. I feel guilty for having a privilege that I don't deserve.
If I was ever the mayor or something that controls the policeman, I would want to go out and look in the neighborhoods where there are people that's very friendly, so you can pick them instead of these guys that's just doing all this training. It's better to pick people that's more minded with the community than to just pick some new guy and get on the street. It's just not gonna work out.
We have these kids from, they're Ecuadorian, and they get made fun of because they look Mexican. And they get told on a daily basis, "Oh, you like tacos? Oh, you like churros? How come I saw your mom on the corner selling ices?" I feel bad for them personally, because I'm wow, they're not, and even though they tell them I'm not Mexican, I'm Ecuadorian, they still get teased.
I'm glad that worked.
Lydia, is there, did you want me to show any of the other videos that we couldn't show before?
Yeah, you can show the second one that was attached to that one.
Second one in that same slide?
Yeah.
Okay, let me pull it up here, just a second.
Thank you.
Just give me a thumbs up once this one gets going to see if you can see it and hear it.
It's not sharing at all right now.
Right. Jews are so cheap. Why are you so cheap?
Do you speak good English?
How are you an Iraqi Jew?
I think the person saying microaggression kind of doesn't really think about it.
This person who said it was my friend, and I was astonished that they would say something like that.
You don't want to make a big deal about it, but then it's also like you just said something that offended me, so I feel like I should speak up.
Because they're micro, because they're very subtle, they're small, you feel like you don't have a reason to be upset. You're overreacting, and people even can make you feel that way when you bring it up.
They're like, oh, you can't take a joke.
You're making too big of a deal of this. Why are you overreacting?
Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke. Chill out.
Say like, oh no, I actually love black people. I love people of color. Like, they try to just minimize the situation.
If someone feels hurt by a microaggression, it shouldn't just be pushed to the side.
It definitely has negative impacts and like leads to people disliking who they actually are.
Those kinds of subtle offensive comments can build up over time, and they can have like a deep psychological effect, and you know, they can make you feel bad, and they can make you doubt yourself.
We try to just use jokes to like make things less awkward or like ease social experiences, but it is important because you need to like be aware of what you're saying and like who you're speaking to.
Think of what you say and how it can affect the person you're saying it to.
So those are just really two short videos that we ended up sharing with our students. And again, we gave them, so we did a Google Doc where they were able to kind of journal some of their feelings after watching the video. They reflected upon it, and then we gave them the option if they wanted to continue those courageous conversations. Again, nothing was mandated, but we did give them the option, and then we let them know, you know, there's a safe space. And that's when we had our DEI coordinator meet with the students along with us and have those conversations. So the No Place for Hate, like I said, that is one program that we have found that has been very beneficial, because again, you can adjust it to the needs of your students, and the needs of your students can vary from year to year. We actually found out about that first. I think it was like Laura Ross, who's like a former school counselor of the year. She presented about that before, so we kind of like took notes, and then we emailed him. Like I said, Bill Hicks is the assistant director of education for the Midwest, and he does handle all of Indiana. And he is like really good about getting back to people if it's something that you were interested in. It does have lessons, and based on what the students' feedback is, you can go ahead and find the lesson and then do work around that. And also if large events happen, so like when September 11th happened, well, not September, when the insurrection happened, they sent something out like the next day. If there was a school shooting, they sent something out within a couple of days. Like right away, if there's something that happens that's going to affect students, they're going to go ahead and make sure that they send information out that you can, they call it their tabletop discussions. So you can go ahead and, you know, reflect upon it. You can share it with either the entire school, or you can share it with committees, depending on how you choose to use the program. But I think it's definitely something that you can start in baby steps if you wanted to make sure that you're addressing and checking the temperature of your school and finding out what the needs of your students are. You could definitely go through that program. I think it's been very beneficial for us. So why is this essential work? So as school counselors, again, we have an ethical responsibility to serve all students and advocate for their needs. This 2021 ABES survey was administered by the CDC. I do have the link in this presentation. And what it revealed is that populations that experienced inequities before the pandemic are now at higher risk for mental health concerns, suicide, substance abuse, racism. And we know, like I know, it's very difficult right now if our students have mental health concerns, because there is not only a shortage of teachers, there's a shortage of, you know, mental health therapists, and just resources in general are lacking right now. So again, populations that were at higher risk before are now, you know, were at risk before, now are at higher risk, and now we may not necessarily have the tools in place to assist them. So that's why it is very important for us to be aware of the needs of our population. More than a third of all U.S. high school students felt they had been treated badly or unfairly at school based on their race or ethnicity. That's more than a third. Students who reported racism were also more likely to experience poor mental health and less likely to be connected at school. And that connected at school piece, I think, is so important. We want our students to feel like when they walk into a school, what I liked about No Place for Hate is you have like a No Place for Hate banner, but which hangs in. So as soon as you walk into the school, you know it's a No Place for Hate school. But besides that, you know, I went to Chicago Public School, and Chicago Public Schools, whether people, you know, issues that they have, I'm not saying that they don't have issues, but I went to a school that was all Black and brown. When you walked into that school, you felt that joy and that pride of those groups. So whether it wasn't just Black History Month during Black History Month, there weren't just, I don't even know if we celebrated Hispanic Heritage Month at that time. I'm going to date myself. There were people who looked like you represented you around the hallway, not just in the classrooms, but just in the hallway. So that way you always saw people who were positive, those positive role models. And if you look around your school, does your school reflect your students? And if it doesn't, then maybe you could talk to your administration about making sure that hopefully it does. So as school counselors, we are uniquely qualified to work with students and help them feel connected to the school community. I am on Twitter all the time. There are so many different ideas. It's exhausting. But there's so many different ideas that we have found just going through Twitter and saying, oh my God, this person is doing, like, there's so many amazing school counselors that are doing such great work across the country. And there's so many different things that they're doing that you just, there's so much that you could take. And this community is so willing to share information and share resources that if you there have been counselors that have reached out to me. I've reached out to other school counselors because everybody has so many different ideas, but you could definitely find out what best practice looks like following these school counselors. While we won't always know student specific needs, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves on how to best serve them. So when working with diverse populations, you have to be cognizant that there are inequities that these students may be facing, and then how are you going to better address them to serve your students. So I have some best practices here. Now, I did not think of all of these by myself. I have been very fortunate. If you are a member of ASCA, the ASCA School Counselor magazine that just came out about a week or two ago, I was a co-author. It's called Culture and Student Mental Health. And Dr. Crystal Hatton is a school counselor educator at Liberty University, and Dr. Maureen Ponce is a school counselor lead, I believe, in Maryland. Both of these amazing school counselors, they're both PhDs, so like their writing is a lot better than mine, but we worked together, and it was a work of heart this summer to kind of come together and talk about best practices that you can do when you're talking about being culturally responsive. Not all people of color have the same concerns, same issues. You don't want to just blanket things, but there are certain things that you can do across the board that are just best practice and can help you. So again, these are some of the things that we came up with as a group. Again, want to definitely give a shout out to both of them because they both are amazing, and this work wouldn't have been done if it weren't for both of them. So that first video that we didn't get a chance to see, that did talk about that bias. So reflect on your own biases. We all have biases, and that's fine. Like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you want to make sure that you're aware of that and address them as you move forward and work with students. Demonstrate cultural humility. When we were writing that article, we spoke on there were different pieces to it. And I did write about the Latinx. Dr. Hatton, who is a Black professor, talked about working with Black students. There were parts to it that we didn't necessarily represent. And so when it came to like Native American students and reading about that, and Dr. Ponce did a lot of that work, we have to treated, again, we're not part of that group, so we want to be mindful and respectful of the traditions and the teachings of that group, and not come in as if we were an expert of it. So you always want to come in when you're working with diverse populations, you want to make sure that there is a level of humility there and that you want to learn from it. A lot of the work that I've been able to do is literally just learning and unlearning from other counselors, and figuring out, like, I had just talked to Amanda before we started, like throwing spaghetti, hopefully something sticks, and then we can kind of come up with something that'll work for our students. Cultivate cultural competence by seeking professional development. So this would be probably considered some professional development for that, but definitely there are amazing school counselors. Alicia Oglesby has a group called a book called Interrupting Racism. How I even started myself in becoming interested in finding my own voice and realizing the power that I had in my own voice was school counselor chat that was held a couple of summers ago, and reading her book and then meeting her and talking to her about the work that she's doing. And then, but again, it's just constantly learning and figuring out like what is best practice, because so many things are changing, but how we can work together to kind of move forward for our students. Analyze the data. So we as school counselors, I was actually in two different meetings this morning with school counselors from both our neighborhood high schools, and they are talking about data. As school counselors, we have to look at data, right? But you also want to make sure that you're looking at data to see if there's issues when it comes to discipline, when it comes to academics, when it comes to attendance, that is disproportionate for Black and Brown students. And you want to make sure that if you are noticing that there are disproportionalities, that you are building that relationship with your administrators, so that way you can have those conversations, because your role is not to talk to a teacher and say, hey, this, right? But your role is to have, to make sure that that you're aware of it, but then you could also address the student, you could also address the administrator, you could also do professional development and talk to teachers about issues related to bias or things that might be affecting those students. But you definitely want to make sure that you're bringing concerns to your administrators. Is discipline data, is there disproportionality when you're enrolling students in courses? I've been in a lot of PD where people say the school counselor said I couldn't do this. The school counselor said I couldn't go to this particular college. The school counselor said that my grades weren't good enough. And certainly sometimes grades, are gonna have a factor, but are gonna be a factor. But you want to make sure that you are not like the response was almost like they were gatekeeping, and we don't want to be that gatekeeper. And we want to assist students, but we want to have conversations with them about like what is responsible. We also want to make sure that if they're able, you don't want to let them know, oh, well, you can't do this, or you can't do this because you're first generation, or you can't afford it. There's so much different financial aid that's available to students. You want to make sure that, that you don't stop them from before they start. But also make sure that in advanced courses, you want to make sure that is, again, reflective of your population. And reach out to teachers and administrators if you're noticing that there is something that has to be corrected. Advocate for change. You've seen things online about, I'm sure, like people cutting students' hair or saying that hair is not appropriate. Are certain policies policing certain groups of students? And if they are, and you're noticing that, what can be done to change that? Are there school dress code policies that need to be addressed? Are they targeting certain students, certain groups? Again, you are the advocate for all students. So you definitely want to make sure that you are having respectful conversations with your administrators, having conversations about, look, this policy is doing this, and this is the numbers, and I can prove to you why, and here we go. And what can we do differently for that student? Because it's a lot better than you having those honest conversations with your administrator than parent groups and other people getting involved later on when things escalate. So definitely, since we do look at data, make sure that you advocate if you see that there's some things that need to be changed. Establish safe spaces. You want to make sure that your families and your students feel safe when they're talking to you, whether it be students who are undocumented, whether it be members of our LGBTQ plus population. You want to make sure that our students feel safe and are able to come to us, that their families are able to come to us, and to make sure that we're able to help them. Okay. Develop effective school family community partnerships with a network of individuals and resources that are available and accessible to students. So when you are working with different communities, is the community that works really well with the church? Is the church the way for you to kind of figure out like what's going on in the community? Reach out to your local churches, reach out to community centers. Reach out to, like I had mentioned before, reach out to students and families when it's in a language that they could understand, at a time of day that they could understand. You want to find out if you want to find out what's going on in a community, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to the people who are in the community and not make assumptions. You want to make sure that your PTSA might have connections with a church or another group. And build those community relationships and build those partnerships. It's something that we're trying to do here. And it's something that, that we're seeing as being successful. Foster genuine relationships with students and families. So you want to be intentional. Again, a lot of us might come into communities that we serve, and then we leave the community and we leave at 2:30, 3 o'clock at the end of the day, and we don't know anything about the community. We don't know anything about the students. We want to make sure that we are aware of what's going on in the community. We want to make sure that we're aware. You do not have to be a school counselor of color in order to do that. You should be able to, again, be intentional about making those relationships with people and build upon them. It's not anything that's going to happen overnight, but definitely you want to be, you want to be one of those go-to people that in the community, if they see you, oh, this is Miss Amanda, and she's going to be able to, she's going to advocate for us, and she's going to make sure that our students are getting the treatment that they deserve and all the resources that are available to them. Elevate your voice. So have those courageous conversations with others. You're going to want to make sure that we're working to dismantle bias, dismantle racism, dismantle discrimination. As school counselors like that, we should be advocating for all of our students. If we feel students are not being treated fairly, then it is about building those relationships with your administration and voice your concerns. The level of I could look back and I always say we center student voice, and a lot of times when our students were working with the No Place for Hate, they found their voice. We didn't give them their voice; they already had their voice, but they found their voice. And I think for me, I could say that happened at the same time for me, where I was like, okay, you know what, I can prove the work that we're doing. I could prove that we're doing a good job. I could prove that what we're doing is in best interest for students, and I'm sharing that information with my administration, and they understand that, and they understand our roles, so they're more able to work with us about getting our program and getting the work that we need to get done. So again, having those conversations with your administrators and making sure that they understand what your role is, and that sometimes we're going to have courageous conversations with students and with families, but that's why we're here. That's why we're that go-to for that family. Create a network of diverse individuals. You have to work with different people with different lenses in order for you to come up with a different result. If you're only working with school counselors even, then you're going to get that result based on what we see as important, what we see. But if you're working with students, if you're working with community partners, if you're working with outside agencies, if you're working with families, then you're able to get a diverse group of individuals together, and your result's going to be so much different, and it's going to be so much more impactful for the student. Okay, so culturally responsive school counseling, where am I at? Did I get that? Okay. So it's not an add-on or something more to do. It should be how we do. So it's not just something, okay, this is something extra that I'm doing. If we do this continuously throughout the, and it becomes part of our everyday life, then it's best practice. And you can just, again, go into your day knowing that you're doing what's in the best interest of all of your students. So these are some additional tips to get you started. So this is some of the things, again, I worked as the lead school counselor at Scott Middle School for 6 years. We are a ramp school. Not everything that we did was perfect, and we've done a lot of work since then, like again, that learning and unlearning. So these are just some of the things that, and even now at the district level, like working with the high school counselors and working with different community partners to figure out like what we can do to make sure that we are more inclusive and being culturally responsive to all of our families. So schedule parent meetings at times that best suit families, or schedule like our phone interviews. So sometimes we would have like Zoom calls, sometimes we would have phone calls from families. I remember a mother calling and just being excited just to be able to talk to me. It was a little bit later, but we had set up an appointment beforehand, and she was just grateful for the information that I was about to share. Reach out to your local churches, community partners, and learn more about the community, find out the needs of the community. We had a church across from the street from us, and she would always like give us, we would work together. So as part of like our program, we would do like a food drive. So we would do a food drive, and she had a food bank. So during COVID, they helped so many of our families. And then when they got a grant, they gave us things right back. So it was just building that partnership. So build those community partnerships with those around you, and you never know where that's going to lead. Reach out to members of the National Pan-Hellenic Council. So those are the Divine Nine or other multicultural organizations. We're very fortunate that we have a lot of colleges around us in your 2- and 4-year schools, but reach out to members of the Divine Nine, other multicultural groups, because they're always willing to come and meet with students. We did have like the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity mentored some of our students a few years ago. They did that for 3 years. But again, they're always willing to come out, whether it's a long-term mentorship program, whether it could be just, speaking to students about what college looks like, what their experiences have been. But again, reach out to these diverse organizations, NSBE's National Society of Black Engineers. Reach out to them on your college campuses. They've come out and worked with us before. Again, just different ideas like that. Take time to learn the needs of your community by not making assumptions about the community, but definitely working with them. Sending letters home in Spanish and English. I know I'm almost out of time. Sending letters home in Spanish and English to make sure that you are reaching and you are being equitable and reaching your entire population. Ensure that your speakers that you have coming into your buildings are as diverse as your students. What we are starting this year, working with Purdue Northwest, is having our FAFSA nights in Spanish and English. So we're really excited about that. And even hosting them in your local churches. But reach out to your schools to see if they're, reach out to your neighboring schools to see if they're able to provide, to help you with the FAFSA night in Spanish. And I know Purdue Northwest was able to do that for us. So again, this work is always evolving. It's always about learning and unlearning and finding out what best practices are. But don't get flustered. Just understand that, it's a process, and every step is a step in the positive direction. So don't give up. Your kids and your students deserve it. That's it. If you have any questions, I don't know if we have any time I don't see any questions in the chat. If you have any questions, you can always email me, because I know there's some information here. You could always email me, and I'll be more than happy to reach back out to you. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties earlier.
Yes, I apologize again for the video. You do have access to the slides. They were entered into the chat a little bit ago. So please feel free to access those videos at your leisure. And we will close out the session. Lydia, you didn't see any questions in the chat. We will, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to add those here in the next minute or two as we close, and Lydia can respond to those accordingly. I do want to thank you all for your attendance. Again, sorry for the video issues. Lydia, thank you so much for being with us today. And we just want to share a few things. You can see here on the screen, there is a link if you want to fill out a session evaluation, which also will allow you to request a PGP point for license renewal. And if you're an active member of the Indiana School Social Work Association, you can also request a CEU that will be sent to you from INSWA if you are an active member with them. So please take a minute to do that. Otherwise, I want to share just a couple of quick upcoming events before we close here. You can see we have lots of things coming up with our monthly learning. Most of it is virtual and most of it is free. So we have Counselor Connections happening around the state of Indiana, taking place at the Regional Educational Service Centers. So if you visit our website, you'll be able to connect with your regional activities that are happening. We are sharing a Zello overview at the end of the month, and also a Carrying the Torch introduction and an introduction into our Comprehensive School Counseling Institute options on October 26th. So please be sure to join us for those. November 2nd, we're talking about MTSS and the role of the student service professionals. And then on November 9th, we have some virtual networking that is available to anybody statewide. And then also we are doing some more intensive professional learning options, including school counselors for MTSS, which will kick off in January. We have a restorative practices readiness for leaders series that has already started, but you can register at any time throughout the school year. It is a course in Canvas. So you'll be able to access any recorded sessions and also join the remaining 5 live virtual sessions as well. And then, of course, our Comprehensive Counseling Institute, which we will share more about at the end of October in our overview webinar. So be sure to check that out. Here's our contact information if you have any questions. And with that, I am going to, again, take a quick peek at the chat to see if we had any questions added. If not, we thank you again for being with us and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.